All right, everyone. It is 5 minutes after the hour, and we are going to get the webcast started. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules. I'm excited to share this message with you, and hopefully you'll leave here with some new information. And if there's anything you feel that you'd like covered that we aren't covering, please feel free to ask questions. Those who just joined, there's a question box. You're more than welcome to use it along the way. We will keep people muted simply for the sheer ability to control the flow of the session. So today's session is cloud costs and benefits, and I've got the privilege to take you through this for us rather exciting topic. Cloud is one of the most talked about technologies of recent years, but it's also one of the most hyped technologies of recent years. And one of the things we see is a lot of hype around that. I'd like to introduce who we are. Personally, my name is Mikkel Nesager. I am one of the founders of Kostner Group. I come with more than 10 years of experience in IT cost optimization. I've done advisory for managed services providers, enterprise customers, global technology players, and how they can create business models for alternative business models for services like cloud, also classical on-premises hardware installations and that sort of thing. About 2.5 years ago, I co-founded Kostner along with an IP rights lawyer and a number of technical staff members. And Kostner is centered around doing advisory in the space of IT, specifically IT cost optimization and IT cost design. We use artificial intelligence in place of traditional consultants. We have more than 40 large enterprise customers, including 10 of the largest managed service partners in the Nordics. We have covered more than 150,000 servers in our analysis that we're going to look at today. And we're happy to share some of the insights that we've gained working with a lot of these very large enterprise customers. I'm going to be brief about what we do, simply to give you an idea about what's our standpoint in this, where are we coming from. Kostner is an advisory, specializes in three things. Answering the question, where are you today? Means we do accurate bottom-up cost and configuration baselines and benchmarks. If you want to know where you're going, it's a good idea to know where you're at. Then we answer the question, where are you going? And we use AI to simulate customer environments running in public cloud, for instance, or on new hardware, whether that's from HPE, Lenovo, or any other manufacturer in the market, but also converged platforms. That's one of the choices that most customers have at the moment. It's like, what are we going to do for our next platform? It's one of the things we specialize in answering. Then finally, we work on eliminating non-compliances and saving money on Microsoft and VMware licenses, both on-premises and in the cloud. And typically, we'll see savings about 20 to 35% license consumption. We call this the Kostner Decision Maker Suite. And effectively, what we look at here is we look at analyzing, so again, baseline benchmark, simulating the future, and then optimizing. We do that across virtual servers, we do that across network, Microsoft Azure services, Office 365 subscriptions, storage, and indeed many more things than that. But these are the primary categories that we cover. But that's enough about us. We're on to today's topic, which is cloud costs and benefits. And for those of you who joined here during the introduction, my name is Mikkel Nesager. I'm happy to take you through this today. We will keep people muted, so if you have a question, please feel free to use the question box, and we'll try to answer those as we go along. The cloud. Why are we talking about cloud? Why are you here? Well, it's impossible to open a browser or talk to anyone in the IT space without being absolutely bombarded with the message that unless you're doing a cloud first or cloud only strategy, you're a dinosaur. Whether that's Gartner or it's Amazon or Microsoft or indeed any of the big four consultancies or a number of others, this is the message that's being pushed. And we feel it's important to talk about that message and whether that's actually true or whether that really just benefits a number of players in the market. So what we'd like to do today is try to give some nuance to what is cloud not, and what are some of the benefits that people are expecting? What are they actually getting? And how does that compare to one of the most obvious things we're going to talk about today is costs. So just to say, cloud is a lot of things. Cloud is software as a service. It's what we use. It's Salesforce, it's Office 365, it's Zendesk or Cisco WebEx, or what we're doing right now, which is a GoToMeeting, GoToWebinar service. So these are all software as a services components. It's one portion of cloud. It is indeed the one with the vast majority of number of cloud services. It's the one most people will be familiar with. There's platform as a service. It's what you build with. And Azure, it's SQL DB, it's Amazon's IoT platform, it's the Google App Engine. It's a number of sort of infrastructure components that are more or less managed. And then finally, we're going to talk about today, and that's the portion we're going to cover, is infrastructure as a service. Now, this is where you move to it. Now, why are we going to focus on that? We're going to focus on these things. That's where we have the Azure VMs, where you Amazon EC2 VMs, it's your Google Cloud, it's your cloud storage. This is what we focus on because software as a service, people are going to get things that they want there. It's going to be more expensive. There are things there to consider too, but today we'd like to really focus on infrastructure as a service. Also, given that many of you are participating from Hewlett Packard Enterprise, I think this is probably the topic we're going to get the most out of. If any of you have more questions around pricing and cost comparisons and things for the traditional software as a service or platform as a service, you can ask the questions. We'll probably cover them at the end, or we'll do a separate webinar on those. But today we're going to be talking about benefits and costs for infrastructure as a service. Now, these are the benefits our customers tell us that they're hoping to get out of running in the cloud. They're hoping to get speed of delivery. What that means is that they're hoping to really be able to provision servers faster, get access to the compute power they need immediately. They're hoping for flexibility, the classic, we can power up and down, we do all these things. They're hoping for simplicity. Managing multiple vendors and all these things can be complex, and they're hoping for simplicity in their services. They are hoping for organizational savings, which is a fancy term for layoffs. And then the cost savings is a really big thing. And then one of the smaller things, part of the cost savings, also that it's hard to get financing, so many of them are hoping for no upfront investments. These are the benefits, and I want to go through them and talk a little bit about what do we actually see when customers move infrastructure to the cloud. Now, speed of delivery. The perception of on-premises speed of delivery is that it takes anywhere from 2 to 4 to 6 months to get a VM or a server installed. We have this perception of a long, complicated approval project or process. Then we have to technically specify everything, things like what IP range is it going to be and all these things. There's a long lead time from your hardware manufacturers or your hosting providers. And then finally, we have to install the machines, and it takes a while. The expectation of cloud is that there's none of the approval process, there's none of the technical specification, there's no lead time. You literally push a button and you're there. Now, important thing to notice here is that one of the reasons it does take longer to get services provisioned on premises is because we want an approval process. Most of our customers, and I think many of the companies you work with or in, have ITIL standards. They have processes in place to prevent a sprawl of services, and they ask a lot of technical questions to make sure things like security is configured correctly. The lead time is true. If we're ordering physical hardware, there's long lead time on that. The install time is typically a lot shorter than we expect. Now, when we see customers move to the cloud, I just want to cover one of the really dark sides of speed of delivery. Now, this is a real customer case. We did a customer, large globally operating customers, who had a no process, no approval provisioning set up in Azure. It was their test environment, so they believed. It was 1/6 of their total environment size, so about 1/6 of the VMs were there. It comprised 52% of their total running cost. We'll get into cost later. Less than a third of the cost could actually be allocated, which means no one really understood, what was it's doing, where was it going. There was zero MSDN licensing used, so they weren't using test and development licensing. They weren't using Azure benefits, and we found a lot of production machines running. Now, this is not a unique case. This is in general what tends to happen if you just give people free range to provision services wherever they want, whenever they want. People put it up, they forget to take it down, no one's tracking the costs, and cloud isn't as simple as we'd like. There's a lot of services to choose from. So negating processes like the approval process or the tracking process for costs has a dark side. Now, the second benefit, flexibility. Our customers expect to when they move to cloud, be turning off their machines at night and weekends. It's one of the most often mentioned expectations. They also expect to be reducing capacity to a minimum when they're not using the machines very intensely, and they will expect to be able to do this whenever they want on the fly. The challenge we see is that most companies retain external backup services, which means they'll use their existing backups. And when do we take backups? Well, at night. When do we take full backups? Well, at weekends. So what you see is that we actually see customers not powering off their machines. Less than 1% of the Azure VMs we see have run for less than the entire month that they've, once they've been put up for full months. They're always running. At the same time, reducing capacity doesn't really happen. Your dev teams, they work nights, weekends, and capacity is constant. And if it's changing, we see it changing up. You'll increase power to a VM or to a service and then forget to turn it down. And then finally, one of the big topics is the capacity changes in Azure and some in Amazon require restart of services and or servers, which means for things like SQL Server databases, all connections will be lost and then have to be reestablished, which personally for Kostner, what we do is we use a number of services to run very large databases when we do AI simulations. And if we realize that we need extra power, we can't increase the size of the machines during that process. We have to actually start over. Otherwise, we'll lose connectivity. So the reality of flexibility is quite a bit different from what customers expect. And then there's simplicity. Now, this is pretty much what most customers expect of the cloud in terms of the experience. Now, for those of you who've been doing IT a while, you'll recognize this picture as the one that we used for explaining why outsourcing was going to be great. That once we go to the cloud or once we go to an outsourcer, everything will be simple, right? We all know the expectations. There will be no more software audits. We'll always be compliant. We have a simple one vendor invoicing program. We don't have to deal with thousands of or hundreds of vendors. It always works, never breaks, and there are no more geeky specialists to deal with, and support is always easy and great. Now, the experience our customers have is less good. You still do have to make sure you run your software audits or software compliance. Most customers end up with a whole host of various cloud providers. Cloud is not immune from breakdowns. I think Azure and Amazon both have highly publicized outages, some lasting quite a long time. We'll get back to the geeky specialist parts, but safe to say you won't have a smaller, less complicated IT department when you're done with it. And the support, well, that's more of a, tastes differ, but we rarely hear our customers lauding cloud support. Now, I want to talk briefly about organizational savings. It's one of the things customers hope to get out of it. Now, this is every human resource manager's wet dream in large corporations, right? Let's get rid of some people. People are expensive. People are complicated to deal with. When we look at what you do today in enterprise IT, sort of the legacy IT systems, we do everything, right? On premises, we manage the data centers, the networking, the storage, the servers, virtualization, operating systems, databases, security, and applications. Our expectation for infrastructure as a service, as a customer, is that someone else will be managing data centers, networking, storage, servers, and virtualization. So we can focus only on the operating systems, the databases, the security, and the applications. The challenge here is that that's not quite reality. In reality, it's true, we won't be managing our own data centers. Microsoft or Amazon or Google will have the people running around in the actual data center. But we still have to do networking. We don't have to patch cables, but we do have to manage VLANs. We do have to manage VPNs. We do have to manage layer 2 and 3 switching. We do have to manage DNS services, basically all of the configuration. Only now we're not doing it in Cisco configurators. We're doing it in Azure Amazon configurators. So it means we need people with a different skill set. Storage, we will be managing storage. We won't be changing drives, but we do have to provision storage, and many of the cloud services we'll see are really limited on IOPS and other throughput restraints. And the challenge there is that you have to now create storage performance at the operating system levels or otherwise. So you will still be doing storage. Physical servers, you will no longer be replacing memory, that's true. But virtualization, we still have to provision. No one's going to provision the service for us. No one's going to make sure that we have the right amount of installation there. No one's going to increase or decrease the size of these VMs. We still have to do that ourselves. So we're not really getting that part out of it. And then ultimately, cost savings. And I think this is why a number of you are here, is to talk about what are the cost saving opportunities in the cloud. Now, before we start talking about cost savings and things like that, it's important to understand how we do cost comparisons. Kostner has been doing cost comparisons against the cloud for quite a while. We've honed our skills alongside Amazon, alongside Microsoft. We continually work through our data with them to ensure that what we're going to show you here and what we in general talk about is accurate and is a correct reflection of their pricing and the price models and what we compare. To give you an idea, in order to do a cost comparison, we need an on-premises benchmark. What we do here is we do bottom-up costing, which means we extract data from customer environments that allows us to understand what hardware is running, and then our machines know, what was the cost of that hardware when it was new, what was the cost of those processors, the memory configuration, what's the amortization rates, all these things. What do you pay in hardware support to HP? We understand all these things. We also know what kind of power draw there is, what kind of floor space is required for these physical machines. And then we move up a layer and we look at virtualization and say, well, the virtualizers, is it VMware? What kind of license are we using? What's the service and support on them? How long of a period do we need to amortize a VMware license? Because they do replace the SKUs. And then operating systems, we count and calculate the costs for things like Microsoft Windows OS, Red Hat, SUSE Linux, a number of operating systems to actually know what's the cheapest and best way to license these on premises. And then we divide it all out by the amount of workload, virtual workload running this environment, and it's VRAM. It's a limiting factor in all the virtual environments we analyze. And so that's our figure. We look at what does it cost you to run, both in absolute numbers, but also per gigabyte VRAM per month, a service on premises. Now, cloud, on the other hand, fewer components, but these are roughly the components that are comparable when we look at, say, a Microsoft Azure VM or an Amazon EC2 instance. You have the hardware, the housing, the power and the cooling. You have the virtualizers or middleware layer, and you have the operating systems. Those are the things that we compare. So it is as close to apples as we can make it. We are negating things like manpower because we'll have that manpower cost on premises, whether we have it on premises or in the cloud. It's not going away just for that reason. So this is the cost comparison we're doing. Now, cloud, on the other hand, this is an example of an Azure instance. We'll run those. Those are the most prevalent ones in our markets, where you'll see pricing like $0.214 per hour. That seems really cheap. And what Microsoft and Amazon too and Google and others are doing here is they're speaking to our animal brains. We aren't very good at understanding what is that in terms of real costs. So what we have to look at here is like, what's the true cost of running in the cloud? 21 cents an hour. Well, how many hours are in a month? 744. So what's 744 times, 21 cents? Well, we're starting to have to do maths here, and humans aren't particularly well equipped to do maths, right? So it's $150-ish. Well, what does that compare to over a year? How many of them do I need? Cloud costs are complicated. So we had to teach a machine how to do this. And when we let that machine simulate an on-premises environment running in the cloud, we do what we call lift and shift one-to-one comparison. So we take a VM running on premises and say, well, it's at this over provisioning rate, it's this many vCPUs, it's this much memory, these are the kind of processors running it, and then we map it against the cheapest possible instance that Amazon, Azure, Google, or others have to offer. And when we do that for the entire environment, and we're stuck with a picture that looks like this. When comparing apples to apples lift and shift scenarios in the cloud, public cloud is 3 to 5 times more expensive than on-premises. Let that sink in. 3 to 5 times more expensive. Now, this is not the message that Microsoft, Amazon, and others would like to sort of give. They give the impression that cloud is at least cost comparably, if not much cheaper. Fact of the matter is it simply isn't. For high density workload, cloud is even more expensive than 3 to 5 times. Now, high density clusters are those where you have a lot of virtual workload, you have a lot of VMs running on physical environment, it's well utilized. This is where the majority of services run on premises. And that's what we're looking at the left side of the screen here. And we'll see here that here we can react to 5, 6, 7 times more expensive in the cloud. If we look at low density clusters like your remote office or branch offices where you have 1 or 2 or 3 VMs running in an environment, suddenly the picture changes. This is where there might actually be a business case for the cloud, where running in the cloud is cheaper. But again, remember the vast majority of costs are in the high density clusters. That's where the vast majority of VMs are running. So for most of your customers and most of our customers, cloud is a fringe case for a certain number of instances. And again, if you have low density clusters, you have remote sites, someone made a decision that those had to be on site, they couldn't be centralized. And unless that decision was solely based on ping rates, then that's probably also true for what you would do in the cloud. We see some customers consider moving some things to cloud, but in general, if it has to be on premises in a remote site, that's where it has to be. Now, these are pay-as-you-go prices. This is the most expensive concept that Microsoft has, but it's also the one that has all the benefits we just talked about. It's the one that has cost savings. It's the one that has, or not, sorry, not cost savings, it's the one that has the flexibility, the ability to turn up and down, all these things that customers are expecting from cloud. That's what you have. But there are other programs. You have programs like reserved instances and Azure hybrid benefits. And we're just going to cover Microsoft programs here simply for a matter of time crunch. Amazon's approach to this is different. They give more on-premises like services where you can use a wider range of your own licenses. You get native VMware running in Amazon. There are other programs there that make Amazon, their price comparison is slightly different. It's not making it cheaper by any stretch of the imagination. But it is different. So we're going to talk about today, again, Azure, because it's a primary thing in our markets. So look at some things like reserved instances. It's a program where you commit to buying a certain number of compute units. You say we buy, a VM of a certain size, and we reserve the right to run that instance for 1 or 3 years. Now, you get big discounts for that, but you have to pay the entire cost up front. So if you want a 1 year or a 3 year term, you're going to be paying 1 or 3 years of cloud costs up front. You get a deep discount. I think they say upwards of 72% for some very specific cases, but more likely you're in the 40 to 60% range. So you commit to amount of a compute, which means you have no benefit from powering it off at night. You have no benefit from reducing the capacity when you don't need it. It's sort of like, you could popularly say that it's flexible in an upwards direction. So you can always increase the size of these. You can also convert, one large VM to 2 small, but you've paid for that compute power. So there's no savings when you're powering down a VM. It's not like the clock stops and you continue to get the discount only for the running hours. There's no savings by reducing size. If you want to cancel these, there's a steep fee. The fee differs somewhere around 12%, which again, if you're doing a 3-month or a 3-year subscription, that's almost 4 months of service. And there's a limit on how much you can cancel. Most of our customers are large enterprises, which means they can't cancel a very large portion of this every year. I think it's around $50,000, but we'll have to check that specific in your Microsoft agreement. And the terms change often. Just between the last time I did this presentation and this time around, they've introduced a number of different opportunities. So keeping track of what you can and cannot do with reserved instances requires work. Now, when we look at the benefits, what we just said goodbye to is we still have the speed of delivery, whether we want it or not, but we said goodbye to flexibility because now we really have no benefit of reducing the size of machines. Simplicity, we're still renting our licenses from Microsoft, so we don't get the audits, don't get those things, so that's still good. Organizational savings, we weren't really going to get anyway. Cost savings, we're not getting those. And then the no upfront investment part is gone. Now, no CapEx cost is a big thing. Many of you hardware salespeople, I'm sure you'll meet that around. Now you have to actually put down 1 or 3 years cloud costs up front, which is a lot of money. Then there's something called Azure Hybrid Benefits, and this is Microsoft's big competitive advantage over other cloud providers, where they have given their own customers with software assurance a number of benefits when running Microsoft software in Microsoft Azure. If you want to run your own Microsoft software in something like Amazon or Google Cloud and other clouds, there's in hundreds and hundreds of cloud providers that are approved for something called license mobility, where you send an application to Microsoft for a right to use your license online, or sort of register that you're using the license online. But in Microsoft's own Azure cloud, they've made a program called Azure Hybrid Benefits, which, and again, we're paraphrasing here, but effectively gives you the right to use on-premises licenses in the cloud. And as a rule of thumb, we're talking Windows Server, each data center set of licenses gives you the right to continue to use it on premises and then run 2 VMs in Azure. Each standard set of licenses gives you the right to run 2 VMs in Azure if you're not using the licenses on-prem. If you're using the licenses on-prem, there are no additional rights. Now, what this also means is that now you're having to manage compliance. There's no one here who's going to manage that for you. And you still have to pay software assurance or the IaaS rental fees. And if you're paying software assurance, you also have to buy the licenses and keep track of that. So we said goodbye to another benefit here. We said goodbye to the simplicity thing. Also, again, if you're buying licenses, that's an additional upfront investment. But what it does do is it does give a large and deep discount as compared to Microsoft's cost. Now, when we look at what this looks like as cost comparison compared to different models, here we have a comparison where we're using our on-premises central clusters price, which is at 19 Danish kroner, is around 2.5 euros per month per gigabyte VRAM. That's what our customers run compute at. And we compare that to cloud compute instance prices and the cloud rental prices for Microsoft software in 3 of the programs, and then we'll use the on-premises pricing in the last. And what we see here is, again, the picture we expected to begin with, that on-premises versus cloud is a no contest in a pay-as-you-go scenario. Cloud is simply vastly more expensive. Now, the light blue color is the compute instance. So you call the VM itself, and then the darker blue is the rental of the cloud Windows pricing. In this case, it's Windows. And when we look at that and we then go to the 1-year reserve program, you'll see you'll get quite a big discount on the compute instance. And you'll get no discounts on the cloud price. You're still renting that at full price. But the compute instance, you're getting a deep discount on that. Again, here we have to pay up front. We have to do all these things. If we're doing 3-year reserve, we get an even deeper discount. You'll see this is where it starts to approach 40, 45% on that. We're still paying the same for the cloud Windows pricing. And then finally, if we do, I've got a question here. I'll just finish this slide and answer a question. If we're doing 3-year reserve plus the Azure Hybrid benefits, which means now we also have to license on premises, we're still more expensive than on premises in Azure. Now we have a question here. It's a good time to get a question. Asker says, Fyodor says, like what you see, push back even more. Customer might say, with cloud, I don't need to take care of physical venue to keep IT hardware secured, stick to all the crazy regulations. You are a little bit tail. I need to pay for commodity bills, deal with different hardware, and many times delay delivery of hardware. It's true, those are the expectations. And I think that the best way to engage a customer with that is saying, well, let's look at what's actually troubling for you, because most of the things that you're looking to do in the cloud, you can do. Most hardware vendors, I know HP does, provide programs where they actually come and they actually put up the hardware for you, they actually configure the hardware for you. They will even put a container on-prem, including all the power management and all things like that. So there are programs available for that. We say, well, if you want to run your own hardware, you can still save a lot of money by doing co-location. That's still a very cost-effective way to do it. So co-locate in the data center. And then again, remember that it might seem like that's a hassle, but if you look at, say, what does it actually cost you to do those things? What is the hassle? It's like, I have to pay bills. Okay, how many people do you have paying your hardware bills? Well, if you buy hardware 3 times a year, you probably don't have a whole person doing that. Okay, and then you have to actually order all these things. Okay, but say, how many people do you need to do that? You don't need very many people. And what is the cost effect of going to the cloud and saying, well, in this time, if I have to pay 3, 4, 5x more, that might be millions of euros. Can I hire someone to do that for me? Can I hire an HP partner? Buddy says GreenLake does that, and there are many others, and all the other hardware vendors have similar programs. I'm not going to here speculate about quality or anything else like that, but talk to your hardware provider, talk to your partners around these things. But there are great opportunities for doing this on premises. And if you look at it that way and say, well, I can hire 3 people to do nothing but pay that bill once a year, you start realizing, well, hassle isn't necessarily a problem in itself. Also, you have to understand you're getting a new set of hassles with Azure, or Amazon for that matter. First of all, you have to be able to digest what you actually pay for there, which can be difficult. You need someone like us to help with that in order to actually make it manageable. We aren't free either. So there's just a lot of things in that. But just to say those hassles, is like if people actually say, what is it really the trouble? Like, I really hate that I have to wait 6 months for hardware. So that's fine. Buy extra hardware, have it sitting in boxes. The additional capex cost of having 4 physical servers lying in a box are minuscule compared to the additional cost of running in the cloud. So there are ways around that if you help the customers think creatively. And if they're like, you're HP, you have to say that, or you're wherever you represent, send them over to us. We'll gladly have that conversation with them. Hope that answers your question. I'm going to move on. Great. So in the cloud, you pay for what you use, right? This is one of my favorite screenshots. This is Amazon, and these are storage prices. And I love this sentence here. With Amazon EBS, you only pay for what you use. The pricing for Amazon is listed below. And again, this is a screen grab, so it's no photo editing apart from the beautiful red lines. Then right below that, it says Amazon EBS general purpose SSD, 10 cents per gigabyte month of provisioned storage. Ergo, you're not paying for what you use, you're paying for what you have provisioned. So just to make that absolutely clear, and that matters because in many cases, the throughput of your disk and drives when we talk about storage are tied to your size of disk. So if you want high IOPS, you need a high volume disk. Storage is another place where people have a tendency to say, well, cloud storage is dirt cheap. And so we just want to compare here. These are prices on the left-hand side on premises storage. These are prices provided by a large hardware partner who, or hardware vendor says, if you're buying 100 terabyte, they will put storage full flash on the floor for 6 cents a gigabyte and 3 cents for classic drives, including the people management. So it's managed storage, including management software, the cost of the drives, cost of the array, and the cost of the fiber channel network. Just to say that is roughly the pricing we're seeing on premises. That's available to most customers. I don't imagine that many of you will have customers who have less than 100 terabyte of storage. Now, when we look at cloud pricing, what we look at there is, well, if all we're doing is running the cloud or the storage in cloud, and the reason why we have a distinction here, you run it in the cloud without on-premises backup. So all we're doing is we've got the storage out in the cloud and we get a little bit out of it to work with. You'll pay around 11 cents for SSD gigabytes and about 6 cents for hard drives. Now, if you have on-premises backup, this price goes up incredibly. It's almost a factor of 3 for SSD, and it's a factor of 5 for hard drives. And the reason with that is that the majority of cost then becomes the network traffic. Now, with Azure and Amazon, you have to pay when you're taking data out of the cloud. They make it free when you put it up there, but you have to pay when you take data out of the cloud. If you're doing backup either on premises or with another cloud vendor or some other service that isn't in the Azure location or the Azure region or the Amazon region you're in, you're going to be paying for that traffic. And when we look at that, we look at something like the drive itself, you pay for that, and then you pay per operation. Now remember, an operation might be an antivirus scan. So you'll pay, 2/10,000 of a cent. But next time you do an antivirus scan of your Windows PC, check to see how many files are being touched. It's a lot of operations. And then you pay 0.06 cents or you $0.06, so 6 cents for network traffic. And again, if you're doing full backup once a week and incremental backups during the week, you'll be extracting 1.2 to 1.4 times your data per week. And so there's 4 weeks in a month. Which means you're paying a whole lot of money to get your data out. Now, there are other options. You can get a dark fiber put over to a data connection point, and then all you have, your quotation mark, there are citation marks, all you have to pay for is that dark fiber, which again is not free. by any stretch of the imagination. But you have to pay a lot for that. So what we're seeing here is that even just a drive-on-drive comparison, cloud is about twice as expensive. If we include the network traffic, cloud is anywhere from 5 to 10 times more expensive. Now, when we talk about this, one of the important things to note is that what are some of the reasons why cloud is relatively expensive? And one of them is that Microsoft and Amazon have agreed to match each other on what they call general infrastructure prices. Now, what that means for most people is that cloud isn't really competing with on-premises or other cloud. There's not a lot of competition there. And we see the effect when we look at the price development for something like storage. Now, this is Amazon IO1 SSD storage, so it's disk with reserved IOPS. This is what we would use if we were running Amazon, and many of our customers would probably use. And here I want to look at the price development over the last 5 years. Now, those of you who also sell storage will know that the prices for storage have plummeted in the same period by anywhere from upwards of 70 to 90% in this time for SSD. Now, if we look at the price development in 2014, a gigabyte of SSD AWS IO1 was 12.5 cents. In 2015, it was 12.5 cents. In 2016, it was 12.5 cents. In 2017, it was 12.5 cents. In 2018, it was 12.5 cents. So just to say that we're not seeing a similar price drop in the cloud as we are seeing on premises. It's just not happening. We do see some are introducing newer services, different services, and they might be at a slightly lower price point. But in general, the list pricing for the pay-as-you-go programs is not overall declining. Amazon will say they've done a lot of price decreases, and that's probably true in the number of price decreases, but many of them have been on very specific types of services that aren't broadly in use, at least by our customers. So in general, also ask yourself this question: why would they be enticing customers to lock in the price for a 3-year period if the customers would expect that price to drop by 50% in that period? So we don't see this large negative price push on prices, or this negative effect on prices. Now, a real world example of that would be something like Dropbox. Now, Dropbox was an Amazon, born in Amazon, and then they realized they could reduce its operating cost by almost $75 million over 2 years by building its own infrastructure. Now, this is very similar to what we see for our clients who, when they go to cloud, and as we saw the other case here, they had around 16% of services in cloud, it was more than half their total cost. There's a lot of money for most customers to be saved by running on premises. And if you are a customer with scale, you can have scale in your organization, you have scale in the kind of hardware you use. That is where the cost savings come from. So just to give you an example, that even companies born in the cloud do realize this, and that might be a good thing to show to a number of clients. Now, this was the end of the initial presentation. You are more than welcome to contact me. I am on Twitter, I am on LinkedIn, I am on email and phone. Feel free to contact me. But I'd like to open up if anyone has any questions about different kinds of prices, different kinds of services that you'd like answered at this time. So please just use that question box to give an idea of if there's anything you'd like to know, if there's anything you feel that we could cover additionally at this time. All right, we're going to give just a minute. How many companies were part of your survey? It's more than 40 enterprise companies and hosters alike. So more than 165,000 VMs are in these. So it's, you'd say it's a survey, but what it's actually is it's actually data that we extracted. So it's not self-reported data. It's actually simulations. It's actually what data we're looking at, what data we're getting from companies. These are predominantly in the Nordics. So not across the world, predominantly in Nordics. So the question is, are these customers spread around over different areas? These are all in the Nordics at this time. We'll happily do customers in whatever market you guys are operating in, but we have at this point primarily operated in the Nordics. I'd like to point out, of course, that we do simulations across all the different regions of cloud. And you do see slight variations in pricing, but primarily you see variations in what are the offerings from the different cloud providers. More or less, the pricing lies within a very few percent. One of the bonus facts is that for something like Microsoft software, the vast majority of on-premises customers get really deep discounts. Not so the case in Azure. The discounts given, aside from these programs that we've covered here, are really relatively small. So less than 10% typically, even for large enterprise customers. All right, I'm not seeing any additional questions come in. My information is on the screen. You are welcome to contact me in the following days with questions or comments, whatever you'd like a follow-up on. Other than that, we'll release you back to your day-to-day tasks, and wish all of you a really good day, and thank you for participating. Please drop us a line if you like the webinar, and if you think there's something you'd like covered in another one, we'll be happy to take that under consideration.